Hello everybody, Dr. Paccar in the house, and today we're going to revisit a video that I made a couple years back pertaining to a loss of power intermittently on a Paccar MX13. So today we have a perfect example to show everybody, because I know there was a lot of questions on that last video I made. So we're going to go step by step here. So here's the complaint, and make sure you watch this video before you go spending thousands and thousands of dollars in shops not finding out what's wrong with it, and you're spending all this time and money, and the problem is pretty simple, and I'll show you how to figure that out. So first, the complaint is the driver complained of an air leak while the truck is sitting still. And also, he loses power sometimes. So, yeah, the first thing that comes to mind, change the fuel filters, change the fuel pump, change the fuel plungers, change this, change that. Does this all sound familiar to you? And nothing is fixed. So, what if I told you that the air leak and the fuel, the power loss are both related to each other? So stay tuned. We're going to explain all that out for everybody. All right, so if you're complaining or having a complaint of an air leak and a power loss, they could be related together, and I'll explain all that later in the video. So first, let's check this out. The driver complained of an air leak and intermittent power loss, especially when taking off from a traffic light. The first thing you're going to want to do, I know this is going to sound crazy, since it could be related, is go after the air leak. So we're going to do that first. So what we're going to do is start the truck up, build air pressure, and we've already diagnosed this. So this is, we already know what's wrong with it. So as you see, the air pressure gauge is almost down to zero. So we're going to build this up to the proper pressure, and then we're going to check for an air leak, and I'll show you where to check at for this particular problem. This way you guys can see. Alright, so we built up our air pressure. The checks that we're making are pretty basic. So if you have a shop that's saying they can't find a problem, there's two basic checks you can make to make sure that this problem is not yours. So let's check it out. So the first check you want to do is right here at the brake valve. Simply take soap and spray it. If you have air coming out of there like that, then you got a problem. And I know what you're thinking. Oh, it just needs a brake valve. Not true. Always 100% not true. There's still something else that could be causing this. And so you would put a brake valve on, or a brake foot valve on, and not fix anything and have it do the same exact thing. So there's one other check that you can make. You can see it's leaking pretty good out there. So I'll show you the next check to make. So basically this is just a two-step process, and it's very quick and very easy. Alright, so next you just want to take pliers, and you're going to want to pinch off this airline. When you do, one of two things is going to happen. Either this is going to keep leaking, which then would be a valve, or it will apply the brakes on the front steer axle, which would indicate that the ABS valve is leaking up front, and I'll explain how that is related to the fuel, the power loss issue, because it does work hand in hand. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to pinch off that line right here, this line. You want to pinch that line off, and when you do, you're going to want to watch the front steer brakes. See what I'm doing? I'm pinching this off. The air leak stops. And it is applying the brake. It should not be doing this at all. So what is the cause? Well, there is an ABS valve, and I'll show you guys that. That's behind the front bumper on the Kenworth T680. And we'll climb under here and show you guys that. And there she is. That's her ABS valve. Right behind the front bumper. And what you get when you replace it is just the center section. You reuse the two ends on it. Alright, so now that you've seen that, let me explain what's going on here. So what's happening is the ABS valve up front is fed air constantly. So it has constant air going to it. And then as it needs to apply the brake, it uses air to open up valves to apply air to apply the brakes on the steer axle. What happens is that ABS valve fails. When it does, it sends air in the wrong direction up to the foot valve. And since it's going in the wrong direction, it will leak air out of the foot valve itself, making it look like the foot valve is bad, but it really isn't. The foot valve is just releasing the air. So, with that being said, the foot valve can only release so much air at one time. So as this problem gets worse and worse, what's going to happen is the foot valve is not going to be able to release the air fast enough from the leaking ABS valve. Therefore, applying the brakes partially, I found as much as, so as the foot valve can't keep up, see that it applies the brakes. I'm standing out here. It's not voodoo magic. So as the foot valve cannot release fast enough, what it's going to do is apply the brakes. I found right around 2 to 3 psi. If you have a brake application gauge, generally it will apply the brakes just slightly. I found right around 2 to 3 psi. So at 2 to 3 psi, the driver is not going to notice a brake drag. He just isn't. He's not going to feel that the brakes are being applied on their own through this brake valve. So, but what he is going to feel is that the ECM on the Paccar MX13 is actually programmed when it sees the brake light switch and the throttle being pressed at the same time. It's going to reduce power and RPMs. This is a safety feature built into that ECM to make sure that the driver doesn't burn up the brakes. So that's why the air leak is related to the power loss, because once that application gauge reaches right around 2 to 3 psi, it also opens the brake light switch, and the ECM sees this. Once it sees the brake light switch is on, even though the driver's not pressing his foot on there, but because air is feeding backwards into the system, it will also apply air to the brake light switch. Therefore, while the driver has his foot only on the fuel pedal, the ECM is thinking the driver also has his foot on the brake and will reduce power as well as RPMs. So if you have a shop that is just throwing parts on the truck, these are 2 easy steps that if you're not getting anywhere, you can do on your own. I just showed you. Make sure you build up air to 135. Spray the diaphragm on the air brake valve if it's leaking. Pinch off the green line right here and check down here. If the brake applies, then you got a bad ABS valve that's causing air to go backwards into the system or in the wrong direction, which also applies air to the brake light switch, making the ECM think that the driver has his foot on the brake pedal and the throttle pedal at the same time, which he doesn't, but it still sees that and reduces power and torque and RPMs. Alright, so just to show you guys that problem is not normal, here we are at a good truck that has no problem, another Paccar T680. And again, I'm going to go ahead and do the same test just to show you that that's not supposed to happen. So I'm going to go ahead and squeeze this hose off, and nothing should happen down there. Nope. See that? I'm squeezing off that line, and the brakes do not apply. The brakes are not applying themselves. So this truck is good. I've had those ask me how do they bypass that so they can get home. Sorry, I am not going to really get involved in that. The ECM has a built-in safety feature for a reason. You should never ever override or bypass a safety feature in a truck. If you're having a problem, you should really get it towed and get it properly fixed, because the last thing you want to have happen is you don't want a brake fire. You don't want a brake getting so hot that it catches fire. Then the next thing you know, the tire's on fire and it's right here in front of the cab. So that's something you don't want to happen. So never ever override or bypass the safety feature. It's there for a reason. Alright, so make sure you get your, if it is an ABS issue, make sure you get it fixed. And hope this video saves you guys some money. On that very first video I did of this, I had guys who didn't see that video until it was too late, until they spent a lot of money trying to figure out what was going on. But if you have a shop that's telling you you're crazy, or if you're a driver and they're telling you you're crazy, you don't find anything wrong, this is an intermittent problem. It does become worse and worse as the valve leaks more and more because it cannot escape enough air out of the foot valve. So the problem does eventually get worse as time goes on. So those are the 2 steps that I showed you can do on your own to check. They're very basic. So if you have an air leak and a power loss, then first thing you want to do, I just showed you, spray this down here. Check for air coming out of that diaphragm. If you got air coming out of there, that does not necessarily mean the brake valve or the foot valve is bad. So the next test you should be making is this green line right here. Pinch off that green line. If the brakes up front apply themselves, then you got a bad ABS valve, which in turn will feed air backwards into the system, actually applying the brake light switch, because it does put about 2 to 3 psi, just enough to crack open that brake light switch. And once the ECM sees the brake light switch is on and the throttle pedal is pressed at the same time, it will reduce power and RPMs. So a little bit of bad news. for you guys out there that do have this problem. Currently, there is a shortage on those Bendix ABS valves. They're having such a problem with them that we were told it's going to be a couple weeks before we even see one. We were also told that they're in such demand that the local parts houses are only allowed to order one per parts house per day. So that's unfortunately the supply chain issue we're having for parts of trucks. It's unfortunate because people depend on these things every day to make money. But if they're sitting waiting for a part, obviously they're not going to make any money. It's really a bad time to be in. But anyway, hopefully this video saves you guys and girls some money. And we'll catch you next video around. Dr. Paccar out.